Welcome once again to 2024 Global Privacy Benchmark Survey, a 360-degree view into key privacy developments. So the agenda kind of is outlined as follows. We're going to go through the methodology that Gary and the consulting team put together. Some of the overarching themes, Gary's going to walk us through the 10 key privacy insights that were identified in this survey, some of the practical solutions along the way. In the end, we'll do some questions and answers. With that, let's get going. So, Gary?
Paul, thank you so much. Well, we this year had the opportunity to listen to the voices, if you will, of over 1,800 people. The survey was conducted through a series of panels, as well as being made available on the TrustArc website and through a social push that we did. And we're quite delighted to speak to, well, quite a range of companies. We made sure that we had really great representation in several countries throughout the European Union. We had the UK participate. Of course, we have the US, really good numbers in the US, but also Canada and some in Asia Pacific and South America as well. So a really comprehensive global study that we're able to look at the views from a 360-degree view. And by 360, we mean we look from executives. So some 20% were executives, including privacy executives, middle management, frontline employees. And then we also looked within privacy teams. So not only the privacy executives, but team members within them. And so with that, I think it's the most comprehensive report of its kind. Just a couple of other small facts about this. Almost 80% of the people who filled out the survey had been with their company for at least 5 years, several even over 20. But so we had really good representation. People who understood their company mechanics and their views, I think, have a high degree of validity in terms of their position on privacy and how well they're doing and what the challenges are, et cetera. And primarily medium and large size companies. We did talk to a smattering of small, but this is really focused on medium, large size companies. Again, 60% were $1 billion plus. So a great look at privacy worldwide. And I'm excited to go into the results. Just on its side, we make sure that year over year, since this is now our 5th year doing it, and we're very excited about this landmark study that is done for TrustArc, we weight the data so that we can weight it both by the 360-degree view that I shared, as well as by company size, to make sure that when we look at a result and say, well, year over year, what's happening, we can trust that that result reflects the changes that have happened and not a change in the survey methodology. So probably enough of a stats lesson for everyone today. You want to jump into the results, Paul? I'm excited to share some of them. And, you know, when we do this year over year, in one sense, it's fairly simple. We want to keep at what's called a tracker. We want to keep a look at, especially on privacy competence and confidence year over year. So a stable set of questions that are asked consistently, set again, so we can compare year over year. Then we want to look into some unique issues that have come up each year and do a deep dive into them. So generally, we're taking this an understanding of what are the risks and the approaches, the risks out there and the approaches companies are take as they undertake anything, especially in the digital sphere. Private initiatives that are going on, investments that are made, challenges, problems. How many times people have suffered things, and then kind of the Rocky Balboa, you got to get up one more time in your head. What are they doing as a result of that to stay in the game? And then, as everyone I believe in this audience knows, just can I use the word plethora? Lots and lots of regulations, lots of jurisdictions. And it's hard. That's why TrustArc exists. Right. It's hard to keep on top of that. Our survey looks at that as well and looks at some of the challenges involved in kind of the core, if you will, if I may, the legacy regulations, and then some of the new ones. And then this year in particular, not only the regulations around AI, but just the impact of AI in general. This survey tackles it as is it as important, and the thing that is kind of most dominant in most people's mind in terms of the current digital transformation. So we take a really deep look into AI this year and its implications for privacy as well.
And I, kind of echo the same thing. There are absolutely no surprises here as traveling around the country and talking to privacy folks and some security folks. each one of these resonates very loud and clear in just about every conversation um, I've had the fortune of participating in, hear it loud and clear. So let's get into even greater detail. So looking ahead at our top 10 key insights impacting organizations today.
Yeah, so Paul, what I wanted to just let people know is here's the first one. We're going to take you through top 10 sort of insights. So the survey, of course, is a chronology. We've got lots of things we can look at, but what we did is we distilled out. So, what's our top 10 list of things that really stood out and are worthy of some good conversation and maybe some surprises, some not surprises, but let's look at kind of how people are doing worldwide in companies on the issue of privacy. And so as we look at this first one, we'd see that the risks, perhaps you're not surprised by this, Paul, but artificial intelligence, brand reputation and compliance, real challenges for companies. I've looked at this. By the way, I've also done a lot of research on cybersecurity, and so there is like a kind of a Venn diagram overlap in these. But especially as it pertains to AI, but for AI and privacy, a few things stand out: transparency and explainability of the models that are being used. The whole notion of we've got a black box and you ought to buy it. People aren't buying that anymore. They're like, we want to know what's in here, and we want you to be able to explain it if you want me to participate in it. And that's obviously for users, but as well as the demand representing consumers by regulators. How decisions are being made within these AI products and services that are being built and are being deployed really quickly right now throughout the world. Obviously, any lack of transparency that leads to challenges in complying with privacy regulations where clear explanations are needed. And there's a lot of work. Obviously, you need data scientists, you need all kinds of experts to help you put together the effort behind building out great AI products and services. But I think what we're learning from the world of privacy is they can only be as effective as they are interpretable and explainable to the people who are going to use them. The other big thing is, Paul, and I'd love to get your color on this, is just, as much as we're all probably enamored to some degree or another with AI and what it offers, and perhaps a little nervous about it too.
Yes.
AI doesn't regulate AI. Human beings do. And I don't mean just from a regulatory legal perspective. I mean, what goes into these, I'm a data scientist myself, what goes into these models and the choices we make as human beings, what goes into them. If we have biases, if we have predetermined or even unconscious kind of discriminatory approaches, the AI model is not correct for that. It just actually will reinforce it. So we have to make sure AI doesn't amplify biases that might exist in the training data, the design of algorithms, and then, as with all good, both science and technology, a lot of rigor in terms of testing and validation to make sure that the decisions that it's making and that we're making as a result of what we see with it don't lead to any kind of bias or discrimination. So, and those are just, I'm just highlighting a couple that are out there in the public sphere, not news to anybody, but it does highlight why this is such a extremely high challenge for so many companies.
Totally agree, Gary. Again, no surprises here whatsoever. Every time I would get into discussions regarding AI and some things, I keep going back to, this isn't anything of great newness, right? Other than the accessibility, if you will, of the general public to a lot of the capabilities that for a long period of time, AI has been around a while. It just didn't come about within the last couple of years. I mean, just think about all the search engine stuff that has gone on for years and years. There's a lot of that stuff that is obviously built on some sort of, data model, right? And extrapolation. To me, it just begs back to those old principles, particularly privacy by design, that were coined back in 1995 by Dr. Kevorkian, the information, if you will, czar in Canada at that time, when she and her colleagues put together those privacy by design principles. And I just called out a few here to really revisit those, because embedding privacy by design, particularly all the way through the development of the AI, is critical. To me, the most critical thing is you have to have the communication with the developer up front and center, with obviously whoever's overseeing the privacy function in the organization. It may be with risk people, security folks, they may be included as well, but you really have to have that communication. If you don't have that upfront communication, that's where things get off the rails, right? And so I can't stress that enough. Reputation, I think it goes without saying, particularly if you're in a B2B play. Excuse me, a business to consumer play. It is incredibly important from a reputation, but it's also equally, we're finding, more important with B2B, as a lot of these companies, and I'm not just talking about the European companies, because they've been doing it for a couple of years now since GDPR, but we're seeing now as the US-based companies finally realizing, hey, we need to put together a program. We need to make sure that the other side is also aligning to the same thoughts and principles as we are, and therefore, our reputation is at stake, if you will, in that context. And then obviously compliance, right? The way to deal with that is always have it as a default setting being privacy type of thing. So, but no, all great stuff. Totally see this, totally hear about it all the time from customers. And it's great to see that it is indeed amplified here as well. So if we move on.
Let's do that. It's really highlighting our second insight here. Actually, two insights in one. You get two for the price of one. The first one is half are making it a priority. That's not what's showing in the graph. So half are making it a priority. And by that, the reason I know that is because our survey showed that half of either said this is a really high priority, or we're already doing it. And so, the very small percentage are not doing it. So for most, not surprisingly, AI is a big priority in their business. If it has any relevance to their business, it's a priority for it. So that's another way of thinking about this, Paul, and maybe there are some, but who doesn't it apply to? That's a small list. It's not just those who are reticent about it. It's that just if you've got any sort of digital presence, this has relevance. So the second thing showing here is that 9 out of 10 people are saying it's important. However you want to scale this, they're doing it and it's important. And perhaps that, again, that's not surprising. Well, one of the things I want to stress here, Paul, is to build on your prior point is, around data and privacy protection. It really is about privacy by design. Again, I see this in the cybersecurity research we do. They call it shifting security left. Yes. I don't know in the privacy world if you call it shifting privacy left, but the notion is that this cannot be, what's that overused business term? This cannot be lipstick on the pig. This cannot be something you think about, oh yeah, we're releasing tomorrow. What are we doing about privacy, guys? This has got to be something built in from the very moment you start to conceptualize an idea, even before you've written a line of code or started to put a brick on something in concrete. You got to start thinking about, well, how are we going to keep people protected, right? Just like you build a building and you think about safety, it would be the last thing you do. Like, oh, are we going to put a lock on this? No, you'd be thinking about how you design that building from the ground up to be safe and secure for people that use it. And privacy is no different when it comes to building products and services that are going to serve consumers and businesses. And so AI systems, as everyone knows, again, they require vast amounts of data, whether it's your data or you're borrowing the data that's already out there. You're using open source models, or you're building your own RAG-based models that build off some of those algorithms, but you're applying your own data to it. In all of these cases, there's typically a lot of sensitive personal information, and how that data is collected, how you store it, how you process it, making sure you're compliant, certainly with the kind of the granddates of this, GDPR and CCPA, but also all the new regulations that have come down the pipe since then and are right now, in addition to the ones that are being put forward on AI and safety guidelines. And it's a tricky one, Paul, because like AI, every country rather is saying, hey, we want to be at the forefront of this. Don't leave us behind. But at the same time, the duality of it is it's like, and we need to make sure people are safe in the process. So again, the idea is security by design, build it from the ground up with security and privacy as a core tenant, and think that through and all from design onwards.
Absolutely agree with you on that. And you know, as I jokingly state, you know, when I meet with some customers, and it seems to resonate loud and clear. You know, there's when kind of this AI bubble, you know, appeared, if you will, 18 months ago, particularly obviously with the release of publicly of Chat GPT. There was this kind of a, you know, a visual of everyone's rushing to this train car, right, or this subway car or whatever, and everyone's just cramming inside that car, and everyone is beginning to look at each other and going, so what's the next stop? And really no one knows, right? Yes, there's a few that have some inkling of where this thing is going, but a lot of it is still very much in a revolutionary phase, at least from a public facing perspective. The key is, and after I've talked to a number of customers, particularly the better part of the last 3 months as I've traveled, the biggest thing is they're getting pressure internally. A lot of folks are getting the pressure to do something, whether it's from their CEO or lead or whoever is making determination on business strategy. There's not a lot of folks that know how to get there. One of the things I do want to do a call out to, one of the things that we did create was an AI framework. We've been in this certification, validation, assurance space since 1998 as trustee. We haven't shed that, right? That's still very much part of our DNA. At the request of a couple of large privacy associations, we were asked to step into this space and kind of help out. And I don't want to go into any greater detail other than if you are struggling today, trying to figure out how to get going, or assemble the committee and you're now spending hours upon hours of trying to put together the principles and frameworks and everything that everyone can live by, if you want to save yourself a whole lot of effort and time, come see TrustArc. We do have a new responsible AI certification, and we'd be eager to help you, as we have several major companies today, kind of get on track and focus in on a lot of those core things that everything you're mentioning, not only on this slide, but on the other slides to come, helps reassure that compliance is front and center, user centricity is front and center, all those things in privacy by design, and the overarching principles that are outlined in some of the new AI principles or regulations that are forthcoming, or blueprints, whatever you want to call all those things that are kind of out there in the space right now. We can help you by giving you a jump start, if you will. So with
That's great, Paul. I mean, the one comment I'd make is, you know, I'd be nervous out there if somebody just said, hey, I know how to deal with AI because I've got an AI button that manages AI. I'd be like, no, this takes a little more thought and process and technical detail that we want to be aware of when we're managing our AI. So AI is a great assistant, but it's using AI to monitor AI is probably not quite where we're at just yet. And what I was impressed with, Paul, that just to you know, to your horn, but like, you know, 200 different templates. There's not a one size fits all. I guess that's the other point I'd like to make is that, you know, being able to tailor it to the specific product, services, and sector and the type of company and thing you're tackling. I mean, when I get involved in data science projects, you know, And one thing we want to do is obviously just make sure they're successful. And you read the stats and out there, and many aren't. And the reason they're not is because they don't think it through, and they're just looking for kind of the bandwagons. So you got to make sure that you've got something well thought through from the beginning in terms of how you tackle AI. And I just think your ability to do that in a mindful way is really what is differentiating you there. And I'm really pleased to see it based on these research results. Sorry, I'll let you go on to the next slide. And yeah, as we look at some of these results, a couple of things really stand out for me, Paul. Just obviously the people listening today are like, yeah, we'll get in a lot of trouble if we don't do this. But I think it's always important when you're, for just to kind of arm them with the most important finding here, which is, yeah, that's true. But the number one reason we do it is because, surveying people worldwide who believe this is important. The number one thing they're doing is not staying out of trouble. They're trying to keep themselves in a great place with their consumers, with their customers, with their clients, with stakeholders. And so building brand trust is once again this year, as in prior years, the number one reason why people have, the number one privacy goal. And I do like the expression. I'm sure you've heard it before, Paul. I'm big on all the expressions, but you build trust in drops, and you can lose it in a bucket.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to. How do you build and maintain consumer trust? It's obviously transparency initiatives. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts in terms of how those drops get built, and then how you don't spill that whole bucket.
Yeah, it's a great point, and kind of back to when I was kind of serving in a chief privacy officer capacity with the Kellogg company. Clearly a company that sorry about that, folks, is well aware of the importance of branding and reputation and all those types of things. And Gary, I've shared this with you before, but for our audience, in the halls of the Kellogg headquarters, obviously there's two companies now, at least the one in Battle Creek, Michigan I'm referring to. There used to be posters lined throughout the halls that basically showed between two fingers, your thumb and index finger, was a cornflake. And the cut line was simply, our reputation is as fragile as this. And that just spoke volumes to the importance of reputation, that, 120-year-old company could be ruined overnight if, particularly with all the avenues today with social media and so forth. So definitely, we're starting to see for the first time, right? And we now have studies to show it. Adobe just did another study where it's showing that basically, given the, I'll use your term, plethora of all the capabilities and all the options to buy goods today, particularly online, right? We're no longer restricted to geography. We can buy from anywhere. Given that global competition now in the space for goods and services, reputation, right, now becomes another factor. Before was, well, it's local, and therefore that's what I can buy. Now I can scale the world and I can buy from the global marketplace. Okay, what is going to differentiate me from the local provider? Is it the service? Is it whatever, right? One of those factors that is now appearing, according to the Adobe study, is that, given this new paradigm shift, 7 out of 10 people are starting to now look at, what are you doing with my data? What are you asking from me? And how's that being used? And so for the first time, we're starting to see, I will make a choice, particularly in the B2C category, based on what you're doing with personal data or issues of privacy. So I think it's a huge issue. It's not going to go away because the marketplace is not going to shrink, type of thing. It's just going to get ante up. And I think that's the reason why with AI, it's just kind of scared folks. right?
Right.
Into, it's not, as I tell even our own, internal team, if we think by a compliance stick is the way that people now look at privacy, we're missing the bigger picture. It is much bigger than compliance. It is affecting bottom line, and not so much, kind of the old days of fluffery, a nice thing to have, but it could actually be a differentiator in the marketplace. So,
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
okay,
it's about character and integrity, right? And people want to work for companies that have that. So it makes all the sense in the world.
exactly.
So what we did 5 years ago, Paul, and I'll go over this quickly, but we created what we call the 7 keys to privacy. We psychometrically determined based on like dozens and dozens of questions we asked, which ones came together and were both statistically reliable. That means we can accurately measure these over and over again, and also valid that they really measure the things that we're saying we're measured, and that they statistically predict the outcomes that you want, which is, better brand reputation, higher ability to demonstrate competence in privacy to various stakeholders, et cetera. So I won't read them for you all here, but you can see, the idea is it goes from the very top, from the board of directors talking about it, saying, how are we doing on this, all the way to the front line, which is like, did everyone who needs to be trained on this, can somebody raise their hand and say, oh, there's an issue here, can they do that without reprisal? Are you being mindful of this as a business, et cetera? So those are the 7 keys we've shown here. We took those 7 keys, and if you go to the next slide, Paul, showing 5 outcomes that we also measure, which is basically the stakeholders, right? Confidence overall that employees and customers, their data is secure and protected. And then we looked at 4 different stakeholder groups, your customers, your clients, consumers, your employees, people internally. This is a really big one in your world, of course, partners and third parties, and then general public. And so we combine all these measures into a global privacy index. Index works like this. It goes from -100, theoretically, if you score terribly on all of these, all the way through 0 to +100. And if we look at the next slide, Paul, you can see how we're doing year over year on this global privacy index. We're measuring this for 5 years now, and got some good news to share. We did see an increase. That's a statistically significant increase. It's the guy with the PhD here making that declaration, but you can see 8% is not only, as I can verify, statistically significant, but it's a substantive change. It means things that, this isn't like a 1 or 2 point, and we're debating if it's real. That's an 8-point, that's an 8-point jump, and that's something to be quite pleased about. And then what we kind of did, what we did, and you can play with this yourself, but notionally we looked at, well, who's failing, who's in that bottom category versus passing grades. So a passing grade is you got 50% or more, and then who's doing exceptionally well. Exceptional is just, if you're getting 75% or higher. The reason we've got such a wide distribution here, Paul, is you lost points on this quiz, not you personally, of course. But the way we scored it is for respondents. If they said, I'm not confident, that's not a 0, that's a negative, right? And so we had the scale, we treated the scale such that you can get a negative response as well as a positive one based on how you answered those 12 earlier questions. And you can see here some companies, over a third, which is great news, claim to be doing really well. We're going to look at the implications of that for some of the other measures, and also a validation of what I already claimed. You can see here too. I mean, I don't know if your glass half empty or a glass a third exceptionally full or a third exceptionally poor. Some people are it's kind of terrifying if you enjoy terrifying results, as if there aren't enough out there in social media. Some companies, their employees are telling us, both their executives, managers, the frontline, their privacy teams, they're saying they're not doing a good job at all. So something to be aware of. There's a sizable number of companies that people believe internally are struggling at this. Again, this is a self-report measure. So this isn't something I've gone in and done an audit on. So I'm getting people to respond to a survey. And so if you had any kind of bias, if you will, and we can talk about that as we always do in survey research, you'd think it would tend to skew upwards, but nonetheless, we're seeing a really good distribution here. And some companies, by the expression of their own employees and managers, et cetera, executives believe that they're not doing well. So
Right.
again, some good news in here, and also some like news to kind of make you pause and think that some companies really are struggling here.
Exactly. And one of the things I do want to just kind of mention in passing is for those that are in that, lack of better terms, failing category or struggling, there seems to be a great notion that somehow they will be able to move faster to the right through some level of automation. And we just need to be really cautious about what we are defining as automation. And there are various types of automation, of course, right? One being just simple workflow automation, which is very common, particularly in the privacy area and the software area. There's also obviously things that do some algorithmic, right, computation, right, if then this type thing, and that is indeed also widespread. And the last one is getting into more of the true traditional AI, right, regenerative and type of activity. The big point is here is you still have to do some work. I hate to say that over and over. I feel horrible in having to say that. And I know everyone is overwhelmed. The volume continues to escalate. The bottom line is, and as we said early on, one of the in the first slide, you have to introduce, if you haven't already, gone to a risk-based model to approach these things, because it's not going to go away. I don't care how much automation you have. Automation will solve for some things. It'll simplify like workflows and things like that. It's not going to replace the human mind. Not yet. I understand people are working on that. Got that.
Right.
But at this point in time, still requires some intervention and cannot be completely automated. So just as people are looking at opportunities and services and providers out there, just keep that in the forefront of your mind. Don't expect it to do A to Z, because it may only be able to do A to P type of thing. The rest
good point
may have to be.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's a very good point. I guess against the greater threat service and more regulatory pressure, we are seeing some advancements in technology, and you spoke to some of yours that it's really making a difference. The other thing that makes a difference, this one was, it did shock me, but I was really, what's the word, delighted? I was like, wow. Look, almost half people take a hybrid approach to regulation is, we've got kind of, again, we mentioned GDPR, CCPA, there's lots of them out there, but kind of like, what if we got those right, plus we kind of took a more of a principle-based approach to the others, would we be okay? Well, you can see about half the companies, 45%, almost half, are taking a kind of hybrid approach. Some are taking more like a strictly, hey, we are a very rules-based regulatory approach. But when we put these up against the privacy competence, privacy index, here's the part that did really stand out for me. Look to the left. The companies that are taking a principle-based approach, principle-based framework approach to privacy score way higher. That's 74 again on our scale from plus 100 to minus 100. This is the average. The average is just right on the cusp of doing exceptionally well at privacy. Of course, not a surprise. You look to the far right, people who don't have a privacy strategy. You wonder, why are some companies failing? Well, because they're not trying. Would probably be the simple answer. But those are taking a principle-based framework and approach, combined with good technology, good advice, etc., scoring so high. Just remind you, the average was 60%. You're scoring 14 points higher on that, just by taking a principle-based approach to compliance.
Absolutely. And one of those, and again, just a real quick call out, just to indicate that it's still alive and well. A lot of folks particularly that have been in the space for greater part of 6+ years, know about the NIMITY privacy management framework. It still exists. NIMITY is part of TrustArc, one of our brands. And just recently, we updated that framework to now include AI-specific activities. So if you're using that model, I certainly did when I was at Kellogg, and I know there's a number of organizations that are still using it, as we'll see in a moment. The notion that it is somehow stale or not current is not true. And so you can find this information online or give us a shout and we'll get you a copy of the new NIMITY framework with AI specifically aligned. So with that, Gary, kind of talking a little bit about the NIMITY framework.
Yeah, the NIMITY framework. Well, look, there's a lot here. On the left, we're showing views from privacy team members, which certification compliance standards most valuable to your company. It's a little hard to see here, but you can see it's quite a wide range of standards and frameworks and approaches that companies take. What we're showing on the right, and this is where I think the interesting part comes, is we then correlate that to their privacy index scores. And there's the NIMITY framework the NIMITY framework that you mentioned, Paul. That is TrustArc's. Again, the average company using this is at a 72. The average overall for the globe was 60. So again, a 12-point head start just by adopting the framework. And you can see here that the ones at the top here all include some form of very detailed actionable steps.
Yes.
Whether it's the APEC cross-border privacy rules. Second one there, you're showing like as soon as you get all the chartered accountants involved, and of course they love all that detail. That's just what they do. And the federal risk and authorization management programs, people have taken that to heart. All companies here are taking like a highly technical approach and taking it seriously, tend to be doing better. NIMITY sits within that group. It's not that the others aren't working well. You can see anybody's doing anything is probably doing better than average. And so that's the good news, kind of like a fitness thing, like get out and do something. That's way, way better than doing nothing. But then obviously you want to do something meaningful and comprehensive and that's well thought through. The company's taking that sort of very comprehensive technical approach, doing the best, as we evidenced on privacy competence.
Okay, thank you.
Again, we looked at the software approaches. There's GRC software out there. There's homemade stuff. There's, let's do Excel, let's do nothing. Look, the privacy index scores are pretty clear. I think the interesting thing is just privacy management software built to purpose to do the task that needs to be done. Doesn't surprise me, but that's privacy professionals and companies that are taking this approach to managing privacy with their technology are doing better even than the GRC folks, which is, I know it's more comprehensive, like it does a lot more other things, but it doesn't do the thing you need it to do in privacy, as well as the privacy management software, but it's certainly doing a much better job than free open source stuff. So interesting if you look at who's doing what percentage of companies are doing which, and which ones result in the highest scores in terms of privacy competence. And, returning to the things I like to do, which is to give you the management, common terms. You got to manage, you got to measure what you want to manage, Paul. And we're seeing that here, that companies that measure privacy do, 2/3 of companies are, and they do much better on the privacy index score than those who I include that not sure. Somebody's that result is discarded in a survey, but I think if you don't know what you're measuring, then that means you're not really managing it, are you? Like if you're measuring, somebody somewhere is measuring something and you don't know what they're measuring and you're not getting the feedback for, like, in behind measurement, there's a whole bunch of things that happen in terms of a process. it's not just the measurement doesn't change anything. The fact that you're measuring it and then managing it, setting up KPIs, adopting, different principles and frameworks, the fact that you're at it and trying to move that number, the process behind the number is what matters, of course,
Yeah.
not the number itself. And you can see those who don't measure privacy at all, and people are confident, no, we don't do that. Well, I mean, they're doing pretty dismally. They're failing at privacy. So not really surprising there. And again, just a reminder of what's involved, that from mindfulness to operational integration, absolutely critical.
And I echo, particularly if you're in a risk-based approach or you're dealing with finite resources, and I can't imagine too many people not falling into that bucket today that are managing these types of programs. You need to be able to demonstrate, right, where you need to invest your dollars, right? The limited resources that you have. If you're not measuring specifically where your gaps are and so forth, and I'm talking about more than a year into it, right? Because we know this is an ongoing journey. I'm not, out of the gate, it's a whole different game. After that, you in order to justify your existence, justify where you need either headcount or just capital type of thing, I can't imagine anyone just being given that just because they ask, unless you are, incredibly well known within the organization as well as within the privacy sphere, and that they're going to do that. I find very few have that fortune. And so having something to measure against to start and continue becomes absolutely critical. And I just want to say with the previous one, which was talking about using software, not using software, there's 37% basically that are not using anything whatsoever. And they may be used in spreadsheets and those type of things instead. That's all fine. You're at least capturing and doing some level of compliance. The only thing I keep bringing up when I talk to customers, is that going to scale with you as you guys get bigger? Being able to do it in what I would refer to as low tech, as well as the reporting requirements that we're beginning to see, whether it's CPRA, CCPA, PRA, right? Or, in GDPR and the different Article 30s and 35s, whatever it may be, you got to have some sort of report or skin in that game. So I think being able to do some demonstrative type of reporting and showcasing is really a challenge when you're trying to do it without any type of software, if you will. But you're still doing something is better than nothing. So I applaud and folks for doing.
We saw this year, Paul, the top 3 KPIs were, I mean, and again, you can do this in a spreadsheet, but there's a lot of work in behind it, right? How many privacy trainings did you do? What's your response time to data subject requests? What are the completion rates for your privacy impact assessments? All of these, as you start to get into these and other KPIs, you realize, look, this isn't, you can't just put your thumb in the air and measure the wind. You've got to be actually using some technology and some thoughtfulness to how you measure this. And again, when you measure things, typically you want to see improvement, so you put a lot of process behind it.
Absolutely. And if it was like any of the leadership I had the pleasure of working with at Kellogg, it's all very approachable, but you got to be able to stand and justify. And nothing speaks louder than some visuals, graphics, right, that are showing that you are indeed closing the gap, whatever that may be, type of thing.
Absolutely.
So with
in
that,
God we trust, and everyone else needs to bring data.
right,
like the old expression goes.
Right.
Yeah. Top 3, we're coming our 9th and then our 10th as we approach the hour here. Top 3 areas of importance: third-party risk management, data discovery and scanning, and AI. So, especially on the third-party risk management, wow, here comes one of those other, expressions they use, Paul, but it's a good one to remember. Things cannot, maybe it's not your fault, but it is your problem, right? So it may not be your fault that some data privacy issues have arisen, but if that's your third party and you're upstream or downstream of that and you're involved, then it is definitely your problem. So companies are tightening all kinds of controls and oversight on third-party vendors, realizing that it can make sometimes it makes absolutely no difference if the breach that happens, if it happens, is external versus internal. If it involves your customers, your data, you're on the hook for that. So
absolutely,
the data discovery and scanning goes hand in hand with that. You got to know your terrain, and that's a great way to begin to effectively manage and protect your data and stay in compliance with data privacy laws.
Absolutely, Gary. I do want to call out one thing, and I called it out here on the footer, because I hear a lot from customers, and I try to qualify things for them or break it down a little bit. So there is, you hear this data discovery thing all the time, right? In scanning. And again, I think everyone, because building a data inventory is not easy, it's not fun. No, I get that. Been there, did that in the old low tech way. But do not get duped by promises out there that you're going to get everything you need for specific privacy purposes. And let me break that down. What I mean by that is broad-based data discovery tools are great for IT purposes. The infrastructure team, the security team, right? They need to know where all the data is: personal, non-personal, structured, non-structured. They need to know A to Z because their remit is the old acronym of CIA, right? The CIA triad under security and IT is obviously things that are in confidence, stay in confidence, right? There's an issue of integrity and there's an issue of availability. Because of that, they need to know everything. What I want to make sure is that when you guys in the privacy area are looking at data discovery, are you solving for IT's broad purpose? Or are you trying to just solve for privacy? Because privacy in of itself is really finite. In fact, if you look at CCPA and you look at GDPR and just about every other law out there that has some bases, if you will, to GDPR, there's about 9 items, including your ROPA, right? Your record of processing activity that is needed. You don't need everything else. And I have not found, maybe I will now after this, anyone that can do these types of scans and identify what the legal basis was, what that processing purpose was, right? It's not finding those things that are required under privacy compliance. So you're still going to have to go back and touch things. Great. You may not have to touch a lot of it, but you're still going to have to touch some of it. So just want eyes wide open as you go into these things to understand, there's unfortunately some snake oil being sold out there. Just go in with eyes wide open, understand what is it you're trying to accomplish. Is it for privacy? That's a real narrow remit, and you don't need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to do these broad things because you're not going to get what you need in the end completed. So I'll get off my pedestal on that one, but I felt it was important because so many people are getting baffled by this, and having to tell them the truth is hard, but I think is worthwhile for everyone.
That's great. I feel your passion there, Paul. And I guess it brings us to which is amazing, and it brings us to our 10th and final insight for today. Privacy resources on the rise. I mean, I've heard, I work with you all, and yeah, keep myself abreast of developments. A lot of people hiring contractors, especially a lot of increased demand for them. Um, of course, rely on private. You've got expansion of regulations worldwide, and then current ones are constantly being refined and re-edited. So, you obviously need true, actual legal and privacy advice. And obviously, you're going to speak to this, Paul. It's something TrustArc brings to the table, because if you wanted to invent all that yourself internally, that would be an enormous and expensive task. But the good news is, there's companies like TrustArc that offer a really great head start on all of that, so that if you had a small team, you could manage it, and that in combination with advances in technology. So the AI is great, but just great advances in software technology that have had time to catch up, and then be able to help you as a privacy team, especially manage the privacy requirements. We've seen that improve as well. So all the way back to one of our early results, which is, we made improvements this year. You made improvements. We observed, I observed the improvements that you all made this year in privacy. And when people make improvements, despite the fact that the world is a tougher place with a bigger threat service and more regulations, I think the reason behind that is because people are taking it seriously, and technology and services are stepping up to fill this gap. So I'm going to end with that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I had attended an event recently where TrustArc had put out their latest report, and one of the big findings was it's really tough to find headcount out there, especially seasoned and experienced headcount. There's a lot of folks that are just starting out. We all started at some point. But if you're looking for some seasoned veterans, like 5+ years, very difficult to come by. The way a lot of folks are kind of augmenting things are using contractors. They may not have the money for a full FTE, but they do have some money to do some contract work. You may want to consider taking a look at that type of thing. And so with that, Gary, I want to move to some questions and answers. If anyone, I'm looking now, if anyone would like to ask a question of Gary or myself, please do so in the Q&A function within Zoom. And while those are coming in, just a couple of things. You will obviously certainly get all of this material tomorrow sent to you, including the full recording, as well as the a PDF of the deck that we are showing. These are just some of the things that we discussed as far as different opportunities, services, as well as solutions that were presented today that you may find of interest. So if there are any questions out there, the lines are open, as they would say. We do have one. So Gary, it says the 7 KPIs you mentioned, can you please provide some examples of the other KPIs you didn't already mention?
Yes. Read out the next question, because I'm going to actually search for a very
pull that
specific
up.
answer to that. And while you read out the second question, I'll get you the answer.
This is a tough one. So without anyone in the C-suite to represent privacy, how do you get anyone to care about the 7 keys to privacy that you mentioned?
Let me answer both together, because now I've got my data. I'm a data guy. So I mentioned privacy training, number of privacy complaints, breach notification times, response time to data subject request, PIA completion rates. These are important. Number of updates to policies and procedures. That's an interesting one, I think, just like shows that you're on top of it. Number of completed certifications and or validations. Internal privacy team requests, important, I think, for many companies, they're measuring that. And finally, the number of failed opt-out requests. I don't know if the two relate to one another, but you start putting in place any combination of the ability to do all that, you're taking things seriously.
I think the C, if I could, Gary, the C-suite, because I certainly had to deal with that. When I started it at Kellogg, there wasn't any representation there. I kind of so there seems to be a likelihood there's the CIO or and a CISO, right? Your chief security officer is probably aligned um, with the CIO. I would get really close to the CIO. They understand the pressures, and I would get really close to your CISO. I know some people have disagreements with them, but my best friend at Kellogg throughout these years was the CISO. I could not have privacy without security. Security doesn't need privacy. So get close to them, ride that coattail a little bit, right? And position things in ways like this. For an example, with the CISO, hey, we got a lot of databases out there. Are you interested in consolidating some of these? They maybe have consumer data or customer data or whatever. By consolidation, they can eliminate the need to secure it, right? By reducing the level of security needed on that database or covering that database, it puts more money back into the hands of the CISO. That will speak volumes. As you can show that you're doing your due diligence by keeping a good lid on privacy, and the only way to do that is to create the awareness. Those two begin to go hand in hand. Anytime you can make a cost savings or something of that sort, you usually starts getting the interest at the C-suite level type of thing. As far as culture of privacy, another great indicator, we as human beings do not make change unless it is something that is personal to us. We do not adopt it until it's personalized. So one of the things I challenge you is start having discussions with different entities and find evangelists for you. And what I mean by that is what you need to look for is those little tidbits, those little areas that are driving behavior. One of the things I did was I brought in I can't think of the name. One of the firms that basically does monitors identity theft, brought them in. And first thing I asked to a group of colleagues at Kellogg was, how many have been victimized by identity theft? And just about everyone's hands go up. You are now able to take that and, if you will, twist it around and say, think about all the personal data you touch here and your job. Think about each one of those is a you. How would you want someone to handle and respect your data? It's little things like that. Doesn't sound like a lot, but if you can get people to start pausing before they act, that to me is you're starting to build that new culture. And there's if someone wants to reach out to me, please do. I got some other materials, be happy to share with you on this particular thing. And then this last one is this one is, with Google's chief privacy officer departure not being replaced, do you see a trend in tech companies to decentralize privacy as a function and embed into product compliance? And the simple answer is yes. I think and I've stated this a few times to some other folks and they kind of poo-pooed on me, but I think when you look at privacy, it is one factor of the whole risk management, risk posture. To separate it on an island while it gives it some focus, I think we would be better served that we had one broader risk type of organization, and privacy sitting as one of the two pillars in there along with security. I think honestly we'll get further ahead in what we're trying to do and protect this information than where we've been today. So I do believe we're going to see that trend, that we're going to see a lot more shifting going on in that way. Great discussion again. Gary, as always, thank you for all the work that you did on this study. It's great material. But on behalf of Gary and myself, just like to wish you a great rest of your day wherever you may be. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Paul.